Hello there, friends. This is Spencer Michaud, and welcome to your weekly forecast for September 23rd through September 29th. Welcome to Libra season. It is the beginning of fall. The autumnal equinox is coming this week as the sun moves into the cardinal air sign of Libra. And we are going to be seeing Mercury also emerging from under the beams this week, which is very interesting. So we should see some manifestations of the mercurial projects that we've been working on behind the scenes. We've got a couple squares from the Libra planets to the Capricorn planets, so there is a little bit of tension there that we're working through. A nice little sextile from Mercury to Jupiter, and then from Venus to Jupiter as well. And at the end of the week, we've got our Libra new moon. So today we're going to talk a little bit about some of the Libra decans. We're going to do our essential dignities report. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how Venus is the ruler of all the Libran signs and how she is hosting things and things like that. And a little bit about how Mercury emerges from under the beams. And that condition is called phasis, which is when the omen is speaking a little bit louder. So let's get to it. Let's start with our essential dignities of the week. Before we get into that, if you're enjoying these videos, check the links below in the description. Have a link to a Venmo account and a PayPal Me account if you want to help support future episodes. That is much appreciated. I also have a class that's starting this week if you're local, and visit the blog. And remember to subscribe and hit like on the video if you can as well. That helps everything out, so appreciate that. All right, so essential dignities. As the sun moves into Libra, we've had this kind of peregrine condition with the sun in Virgo, the last little decan of Virgo here for a while, where it did not have any dignities. And with the sun moving into Libra, it has its condition called the fall. And interesting enough, that is the beginning of the season called fall. So there may be some connections there, you think, some synchronicities. And I think one of the things that we see with the sun in Libra, and one of the reasons why we have this condition, I think the rationale for the sun being in its fall. Fall is a condition where the planet is kind of at the bottom of the wheel of fortune. One of the theories that is going around in the educational circles that I'm running in with my teacher at Nightlight Astrology is that the exaltations and falls were sort of the nature of the moon. Where you can kind of see the different phases that are going around in the wheel of fortune. And it's one of those things where we can kind of start to see, with the sun being at the fall, it's kind of at its weakest position. And this is a condition where the days start to become shorter than the nights. The autumnal equinox is where there's equal amount of daylight. So this is maybe another reason when we see with Libra with the scales, where there is kind of this, like, we're trying to weigh and balance, and the balance is actually shifting from being diurnally dominant to a nocturnal domination. So it's more like we're starting to go internal. We're starting to see less of a external manifestation, and we're starting to kind of consolidate our energies inwards for the coldness of the winter. So the sun is losing its power. When the sun is in Aries, it is said to be exalted. It's said to start to gain strength. The days start to become longer than the nights. So the sun, takes back its power at the beginning of spring, at the spring equinox. So how does that manifest with our sun? Well, the sun, according to some Hellenistic authors and one of the teachers that I study also, Robert Schmidt, the sun has an essential nature of authority, like the masculine type of authority, a commanding presence. It wants to command things to take action. So that part of ourselves might be a little bit weakened. And I think one of the things that, if I think about this, it may be due to needing a certain approval before we take action. If we think of Libra as a traditional sign of partnership and balance, we're really trying to, Venus is really, as the host of Libra, Venus is trying to create harmony and trying to see things potentially through someone else's perspective. So it may be a little bit more difficult to shine our own personal light without checking it kind of against the other people and the other perspectives in our lives. So there may be a little bit of indecision that starts to happen because we're constantly weighing back and forth and trying to find that perfect equilibrium. One of the things that I've learned from Adam's class is that the air signs may be a little bit more predisposed to a perfectionism because of their connection with the idealized Platonic forms. We generally consider like Virgo the perfectionist, but Adam's made a really provocative argument for Libra being the most perfectionistic, because there is an ideal and a harmony of form that is very difficult to achieve and maybe impossible to achieve on the physical realm, which is what we're living within. So that's something to consider. We may not be able to assert our own authority as strongly as we were able to, like, say, when the sun was in Leo or when the sun is in Aries. So that's one of the things that we're going to be dealing with the sun in its fall, starting this week on Monday as the sun moves into Libra, kicking off that season. Now, all of the signs have a modality that is associated with a part of a season. So the cardinal signs are the beginning of a season. The fixed signs are the middle, and the mutable signs or double-bodied signs are the transition points between seasons. So Virgo is our transition between the summer and the fall. And we're seeing weather patterns that were indicative of both seasons. That some days it'd be super hot, other days it'd be cold and rainy. And as we move into Libra season in the fall, we're going to see more of those types of weather patterns continuing to be ushered in a little bit stronger. So get your little jackets out and your sweatshirts and your fall attire, because that you may be, if you're living in the northern hemisphere like I am, you may start to see that shift. Of course, we do have other people that are watching from different areas, and there's all sorts of rationales about how the seasons work in the southern hemisphere and things like that. I will say this, though. I think this particular system was created in the northern hemisphere, so it does function with the seasonal metaphors better from a northern hemisphere perspective. Now, we can get into a big argument about how it functions in the southern hemisphere, but since it's a symbolic language, what I have found from my personal research is that the symbols remain the same for both hemispheres. So we can argue about it Libra style if you want to take the opposite perspective. That's one other thing that you'll see during Libra season is sometimes someone will take an opposite perspective from you just to bring balance to your opinion or a balance to your perspective. So we may see that starting to crop up a little bit as well. Jupiter is still in Sagittarius. We've been talking about this for months now. It's in its own domicile, and it does have triplicity in the nighttime. So still a very strong Jupiter. We've got about 2 months left of Jupiter in Sagittarius. I think it moves into Capricorn and its fall, okay, in the beginning of December. So it's time to, expand. It's time to get while the getting's good with Jupiter before Jupiter's condition starts to become a little bit less accommodating to those big grand plans. It may be a little bit more difficult to do Jupiterian things when Jupiter moves into Capricorn. So make hay while the sun's shining. This is a really important period in all of our collective stories for optimism, for hope, for expanding our perspective and our philosophical viewpoints in life, and learning new skills and taking actions that are probably going to lead us in a really positive direction. So get on that while Jupiter's there. Saturn is, of course, direct. We talked last week about Saturn moving direct. It's still in its own domicile of Capricorn. So hopefully you are seeing how the blueprint of the plan and what needs to be done, how all the pieces are fitting together, and what work needs to be done to make the plan a reality. This is a kind of an interesting combination when we have Saturn in Capricorn and Jupiter in Sagittarius. We've got the hope and optimism and the vision of Jupiter, but we've also got the ability to make the rubber meet the road and do the hard work necessary to make that vision a reality. there is a condition between Jupiter and Saturn recently called Anticia, where it's kind of like a secret conjunction between the two. So the signs of Sagittarius and Capricorn are right next to each other on either side of the winter solstice. And so there is an equal amount of, I think there is an equal amount of daylight or nighttime on either side of that solstice. There's some kind of equality between them. I'm blanking right now on that. If you have the details, feel free to comment. But it's like a secret conjunction, so they are working in harmony together. And when you're trying to calculate an Anticia, you want to find how the signs add up to 30 degrees. Okay, so like for example, if we have 15 degrees of Capricorn, the Anticia is going to be 15 degrees Sagittarius. If it's at 20 degrees Capricorn, it'd be 10 degrees Sagittarius. So you see how each of those are going to add up to 30. So that's how you can find that in your chart. So an extra layer to explore with that. Mercury is still in the sign of Libra and has triplicity by the night. So we've got a little bit of dignity with Mercury. This Mercury is very concerned with justice, fairness, harmony, with potentially debate. All right, so we may see a little bit more negotiation and debate that's happening. Of course, every time we examine a planet, we have to look at what temple it's in and who its host is. So right now, Venus is Mercury's host, and Mercury is sitting in the temple or at the table with its host, Venus, who is very, very happy in the sign of Libra. So that in turn can make us have a fairly happy Mercury, I think, a very functional Mercury. As we move forward to Venus here, Venus being in its own domicile, its diurnal masculine domicile of Libra, it is more able, it has all the resources necessary to do Venusian or venereal things, however you want to describe it, okay? Which are to unify, to harmonize, to create balance, to create beauty, to be able to boost the aesthetics of some sort of project that we're working on. And Venus has everything that she needs to do that in a very pure form. And that in turn is helping out Mercury to communicate in a very balanced and a very socially acceptable way, where we may be a little bit more fluid with our speech and things like that. We may speak in a way that is a little bit more conciliatory and with a little bit more of a spirit of compromise than we would have if we were, in a different domicile. So that's something to look at with the combination of Mercury and Venus in Libra. And of course, the sun is going to be joining the party there. So we're going to have, the beginning of a little mini stellium there with 3 planets in the same sign. So that adds a little bit of solar light to the equation. In the first part of Libra, while Venus is still in her own home sign, that's actually going to be supportive for the sun too. So even though the sun is in its fall, its host is in good position. So there still may be a little bit of benefit for the sun being in Libra because its host is in such good condition. When Venus moves into Scorpio and its exile, and I think there is a position where we're still in Libra sun, and then Venus moves into Scorpio, then that tears down the dignity of the sun as well. So that makes the sun's condition worse because its host is like sick or something like that. Right now we have a really healthy Venus, and when Venus moves into Scorpio, that's when it loses some of its dignity and thus will take some power away from the sun. So try to do some of the Venus compromise, negotiating, types of things like that in the next few weeks while Venus is in good shape. Mars is still in Virgo, in the last decan of Virgo, and it's going to have some dignity by being in its own bound between 21 and 28 degrees of Virgo. It also is the cooperating triplicity ruler, which, as we've been saying in these videos, has some merit for timing techniques and house topic divisions. So figuring out what part of the significations of a particular house may be activated for your particular natal chart. That's something we can get into. If you want to do a private reading, reach out and I can, start examining those things for you as well. A little bit more difficult to parse that out in a collective reading like this. The moon is going to be in the last decan of Cancer at the beginning of the week, where it has rulership by domicile. So it's in its own home. It is the cooperating triplicity ruler of the water signs, and it has dignity by face or decan in the last 10 degrees of Cancer. So a pretty strong moon to begin the week in its last quarter phase in the very beginning of the week, moving into the balsamic phase, and we'll talk about that. The other dignities we have with the moon is when the moon is in Virgo, it has triplicity rulership by the nighttime. So there is some extra kind of wind in the sails of the moon in the evening when it's in earth signs. It's a little bit more lucky. It's a little bit more fortuitous or fortunate because the triplicity elemental rulers were said to be of the nature of Jupiter, according to our kind of planetary theory of dignities that we're working with. In the sign of Libra, the moon has dignity in the first face, okay, the first decan. So that in the Chaldean order, the descending Chaldean order of the planets, which is, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, Moon. I think I got that right. The moon is all the decans have a planetary ruler that go in order throughout each decan, throughout each 36 faces. Okay, I think it starts with Mars and it ends with Mars. Okay, in Libra, the first face is lunar ruled, so there may be some more qualities of intuition. There may be more change or turnover in the first decan of Libra. There may be some more kind of intuitive faculties that we're working through, and we'll see that in the tarot card that we're looking at this week as well. Okay, so that is your essential dignity report. Let's get to Monday. Share my screen. Monday. Okay, so you can see this pile up happening in Libra now as we are at the autumnal equinox. And as I was saying before, we have an equal amount of daylight and nighttime hours within the day. So that's where we get the word equinox for. We've got an equal part of light, right? The night begins to take over. So this is where, there are a couple things with this. There are some psychological theories, like Dane Rudyard will put out, that Libra is the point where we start to become more concerned with the other rather than the self-development. We're kind of starting to get a perspective that is not necessarily just our own. Like we've built all the foundations of the material, and we've taken the ego to the heights that it can get to at Virgo, and you could see that with this 10 of Pentacles with the last decan of Virgo. Like you see the old man who's built his legacy, and he's kind of contemplating, is this all there is potentially? And perhaps Libra is the entrance to death and to the underworld, where we're finally starting to have a spiritual consciousness and see things through someone else's perspective. The Libra was also this card that we're looking at here too, the Two of Swords. I'll stop my share for a second, actually. In the Two of Swords, you see this blindfolded figure here, okay? And she is, they say that justice was blind, right? And you can see she's kind of balanced, and she's on a threshold of some sort, right? She's on the threshold of the land and the sea was associated with the subconscious and all the things that we kept hidden. And potentially this is the entrance to judgment, right? We see a lot of themes of justice, judges and courtrooms, legal proceedings happen over the course of Libra season and represented by the sign of Libra. There's a story associated with this card that we've talked about with the goddess MAAT, M-A-A-T, who was one of kind of the threshold guardians of the underworld, where she had to weigh your soul or your heart against the weight of a feather. And it's like, what things have you accumulated in your life, and did you live a good life, and what kind of karma did you accumulate, and what are you bringing with you, and what do you have to let go of as you move through to the next cycle? And that may be something we're really considering, is how did we manifest the goals that began either at the last winter solstice, okay, in last December, the end of December, and potentially how did we manifest those things at the spring equinox at the beginning of spring? We may have had another point of like a check-in at the summer solstice, where we may have had a peak of some of those experiences, and now we may be getting to the point in the solar cycle. It's kind of like a last quarter sun, where we're reevaluating, and we're really looking at everything and analyzing how successful we were. And maybe we're shifting perspectives too. Maybe we are reaping the rewards of the hard work that we did. Maybe we're reaping the karma of the mistakes that we made, and we're having to make adjustments through that, through potentially making adjustments to someone else's vision. We're having a collective dream here, but we all have kind of these I don't know, for lack of a better term, selfish desires, and they're all kind of bumping into each other. And every once in a while, we've got to make an adjustment to figure out how our dream is going to fit into the collective dream. But if I learned anything from the Dark Crystal Netflix series, is we're all one, and we'll all return to Thra eventually, whatever that is in our dimension. Okay, so think about that as we move through the first phase of Libra. How are you weighing and measuring the goals and the visionary things and the actions that you've been taking over the course of the year as we prepare for the winter? Okay. So the other thing that's happening as we move into this Libra sun is we're really seeing this square with Saturn and Pluto being activated. I talked about this in our last video last week too, where we may be, our sense of justice and fairness may be running right up against the big bad, establishment hierarchy. And there may be a plan that we have, a blueprint that we're working through with, when we talked about Saturn in the second decan of Capricorn, we showed a card called the Three of Pentacles, where people were making a plan. And Austin Coppock calls this the pyramid. So we're building something tangible. And sometimes there is an inertia that happens when we're building something, when we're moving heavy objects, that it's a little bit difficult to adjust course, right? We can see this over, time with our government structures and things like that. So I'm guessing that as we move into Libra season, we may see some more conflicts come up with some of the government agencies and the established hierarchies, where people are starting to say, hey, this isn't fair, this isn't just, and we may be trying to figure out how to navigate and bring more balance to those systems of inequality. So keep your eyes peeled in your own life and in the news for where things are out of whack, where the systems that you have in place may not be equanimous to everyone involved. I'll give a shout out to Equanimous St. Brown. This is one of the greatest football names ever. There's a wide receiver on the Green Bay Packers, and his name is Equanimous St. Brown. I think his brother's name, oh man, his whole family has great names, but look it up. It's pretty cool. So I'll throw that in there. I'm not even sure that's a real word, but I'll use it. It's perfectly cromulent, right? If you're a Simpsons fan. Anyway, moving along, we're going to be seeing that square with those Capricorn planets. And it's important for us to use our Venus quality of trying to create a win-win situation. Now, one of the things that we see is the Sun, Venus, and Mercury are all in what's called the superior position to Saturn, Pluto, and the South Node. that means they sort of have the upper hand, okay? When something is earlier in the zodiac and we have a square or a trine or something like that, we're going to look to the planets on the right side of center. So if this is center and we're looking out this way, this is on the right-hand side. Okay, that's called the dexter square. This is called the sinister square. Okay, so when we have the planets in the superior dexter position here, all right, they're sort of like if we have a car chase, they're the ones chasing, and these are the planets being chased. Now, these planets, imagine Saturn's the bad guy. Saturn and Pluto are the bad guys here. Let's just assume that for now. They're not always the bad guys, but in this case, we'll just assume that. They're like shooting backwards to the, I don't know, the police, right? Police are associated with justice. So they're trying to outrun justice, and they are sending harm back towards these, I don't know, these planets back here. Now, the important thing is, though, is that these planets are basically able to see those things coming and potentially avoid them and have sort of the upper hand, where these people are trying to drive the car and they're not really seeing what's going on as much, okay? So that's something, that maybe give us a little bit of hope that Venus, one of the benefics, may be able to create a little bit of a more pleasant situation rather than Saturn kind of bearing down. It's kind of like justice may start winning out over the icy grip of, of Saturn. Hopefully, that's what we. Sometimes Saturn winning isn't the worst thing in the world, but in this case, bringing some fairness to our systems that may be inequitable, may be what we're looking at, and create some forward movement within the collective consciousness. All right. Another really cool thing that's happening on this day, as you can see, Mercury is 15 degrees away from the sun. This is called phasis. Okay. And this was a condition where Mercury is emerging. It's like a big star now. Hey, I can see you. Like here was the sun right here. And the sun had all these beams. And it was blocking out the light of Mercury. You couldn't see it. It was literally invisible behind the beams of the sun. And now Mercury is emerging from those beams at 15 degrees. Okay, the sun casts its light on 15 degrees of either side of it, and planets become invisible. So, for example, Venus is still invisible underneath the beams of the sun, and that was said to weaken a planet. Things would go on behind the scenes in secret. Now, Venus has a condition called being in the chariot. When a planet was in its own domicile, or potentially in other dignities, it was said to be protected from those beams of the sun. So Venus is not in as bad a shape as it could be under the beams because it's in the chariot, so to speak. But Mercury is really getting a boost by becoming visible and escaping the beams at 15 degrees. Now, Demetra George, a really great astrologer, in her book Ancient Astrology in Theory and Practice, talks about the emerging point of Mercury as being a very important omen. That's when we see very important events manifest visibly. So pay attention on Monday at what is happening. Like, I know, to give you an example, I've been working very hard on my Domiciles and Deities astrology class. Well, guess what? Monday is the first day of class. So we'll see the manifestation of all that work coming out into the open. All right, so that's one way that could manifest. That's an example of how that'll come out. So look at the Libra ruled area of your chart. Now here's where it gets really cool. This is happening literally in my third house of like education, of students, of learning, of communicating. Okay, so I'm seeing that in a third house type of way. So look for Libra in your chart and see what area of life you may see an event that is important and that is a kind of a milestone landmarker. And pay attention on Monday, because you're really going to be getting some signals and some feedback on how the projects that you've been working on and how people are going to be responding to them. Okay, so that is Mercury emerging as an evening star. So this is when Mercury is rising after the sun. Okay, so there's the sun, and then Mercury is going to be down here. It is the evening star. Because if we're on the other side and the sun is setting, Mercury will be over here and will be visible in the night sky. So sometimes when things are a morning star, we can see things rise before the sun at sunrise. When they're an evening star, they rise after the sun. So this is the evening star phase of Mercury. Okay, other things that we have going on Monday. We've got a opposition between the moon and Saturn. Okay, we're in the last degrees of dignity of domicile with the moon in Cancer. It is in its own, should be in its own face by the end of the day, but it isn't until 20 degrees. But at 13 degrees, the moon and Saturn are squaring off. And this is really activating this T-square here. Okay, we've got a T-square. We've got an opposition and a square between the moon and the Libra planets, and the Libra planets and the Capricorn planets. So that creates some tension. There's some push and some pull there. There's a lot of different agendas, and each of these agendas are in, you know, a cardinal sign, wanting to take action and lead in a little bit of a different way. So when planets are in cardinal signs, they're going to try to enact a new season, so to speak, but they're going to do it in a little bit of a different way. From my experience, the way that Cancer leads is in a sort of indirect way. They're going to lead through their intuitive, emotional nature. They may be a little bit sideways, scattered, 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, a little bit indirect on the way that they lead. Whereas Libra is going to try to lead through their social graces, through their communicative nature, through their sense of balance, justice, and fairness. Capricorn wants to lead very tangibly, right? Capricorn wants to manifest things physically and take one step at a time. They want to ascend the mountain. Whereas Aries is going to lead just by, we're going to take action, and we're not going to think twice. We're not going to weigh anybody else's opinion. We're just going to go straight for what we want in a very Mars type way, right? So with all these signs here, we've got the Mars ruled sign, the Venus ruled sign, the Saturn ruled sign, and then the moon ruled sign. So think of the different natures of all of those planets and how each of those would become a leader. Mars being a leader is very different than how the moon would be a leader. Venus creating leadership is very different than how Saturn would create leadership. Saturn creates leadership through its discipline and its endurance and things like that, where Venus is trying to create harmony. So on this particular day, we've got the moon, Venus, and Saturn all trying to assert their agendas, basically, okay? Because look at this, they're all in their own domiciles. So they're all fairly equally matched. And when we have fairly equally matched planets, sometimes that can lead to some sticky situations. Now, the cool thing is each of them have the resources that they need. So if we can navigate this T-square with grace, we may be able to make some progress in many different areas of our life simultaneously in a healthy way. The planet tends to express itself more in a more healthy manner when it is in dignity, okay? So that may be something we're experiencing throughout Monday. Moon square Mercury, moon square Venus. The moon is going to be trining Neptune. So there's a little bit of a, added quality of illusion and, maybe a little bit of a allowing faith to help us through what we need to go through. That's kind of the helper. I think that's the way out. I think dissolving the boundaries between us is going to be important when we have Neptune in the mix there. But be careful not to get lost in the illusion or the delusion. If we get too idealistic about something, we can start taking actions that may not be in our best interest. So that's what we've got for Monday. The moon also is going to make an opposition to Pluto at the end of the day there. So there may be some power struggle or power dynamic and something from the depths maybe bubbling up to the surface. So keep your eyes out for that as we move into the afternoon. And then we're going to get a sextile from the moon to Mars at 23 degrees of Virgo and Cancer. So we may have done the heavy lifting earlier in the day where we made a compromise between all these cardinal or tropical sign planets. That's another word for cardinal signs. And then maybe we are able to take an informed action and that is very detailed. So when we have a combination of the moon in Cancer and Mars in Virgo, there's a fertile kind of watering of the earthy ground. So maybe we've figured out the best way to nurture our actions. So we can take an action that is well informed and ultimately should be productive by the end of the day on Monday at around 6 o'clock or so Eastern time. So that's Monday. Moon Day. That's there's some really cool things this week where we have, since we have all these planets in domicile, look at this. This is crazy. We have the moon in its own sign in Cancer. We have Venus in her own domicile. We have Jupiter in his own domicile, Saturn in his own. Okay. We have 4 planets in domicile. And each of those planets will be in domicile on their particular day of the week. So the moon will be in its own home on Monday, Moon Day, right? Venus will be in its own home sign on Friday, okay? Freya. Jupiter, Thor's Day, right? Thor's Day will be in its own home sign. And Saturn on Saturn Day, okay? That's just kind of neat. So, you know, I would say try to tune in to the day of the week and embrace that particular deity for that particular day. On Moon Day, it's time to be nurturing. It's time to be receptive. It's time to be reflective. You know, on Thursday here, it's time to be expansive. It's time to be taking action and hopeful and optimistic. On Friday, it's time to make compromises. It's time to beautify, to cleanse things. Venus was associated with cleanliness and ritual. And on Saturday, it's time to get down to business. It's time to build. It's time to take action on the plan and have mental and emotional discipline. Okay. Tuesday, the moon is going to move into Leo. So we're going to have a Leo moon, and that's going to begin our last quarter phase. All right. Actually, our last quarter phase started. No, I'm sorry. We're ending our last quarter phase. We're still in the last quarter phase. The last quarter phase started when the moon moved into Cancer and was squaring the sun here. Or it might have actually begun at the end of Gemini when the sun was still in Virgo. Okay, but you could see that the last quarter phase is when we have 90 degrees to 45 degrees of the moon behind the sun. Okay. And we will be moving into the balsamic moon on Wednesday, and I'll talk about that when we get there. But we're still in this period of reevaluating, of shifting our perspective, of maybe an existential crisis that we're working through, some sort of internal, crisis where we're trying to make a decision on something, and we may be changing our minds. This is another Libra quality: is we may think we have a decision made, and then we completely change our mind. If I'm continuing to use football metaphors, which, like I said last week, I love sports. I grew up watching the Green Bay Packers and Brett Favre, a Libra. Okay. I was 12 years old when he first started in the league. I was the perfect age to have an idol, so to speak. And throughout his career, Brett Favre was kind of the iron fist under the velvet glove. Don't mistake Libra for being soft. Libras can be, justice sometimes requires strength of character. And Brett Favre was one of those dudes that got injured quite a bit, but never missed a game. And so he had this kind of endurance quality to him. And also, by the time that he started to think about retirement, he would waffle back and forth about retiring. So he would retire and then come back and retire and come back and kind of, is a will he, won't he? So he was constantly weighing the decision that he was trying to make. And we may see ourselves starting to manifest that a little bit as we move forward in our lives through Libra season. Okay, so on Thursday, we're going to see a sextile between the moon and the sun at 1 degree of Leo and Libra. So that's a positive kind of a adding fire to the air here. So when the match hits the proper oxygen level, it helps to enhance the flame. So we may see that some of our actions are meeting a fertile quality of air and fire mixture, and that may give us some enthusiasm to our ideas. Excuse me. The other aspect we're going to be seeing in the morning of Tuesday is we're going to have a square between the moon and Uranus. Okay, the moon in Leo and Uranus in Taurus. So this echoes back some of the challenges we were facing in the end of July and the beginning of August, when we had all those Leo planets hitting up against Uranus. And since Leo and Taurus are both fixed signs, we may have a little bit of a stubbornness and a little bit of a challenge of pride. So on Tuesday, I would check yourself for signs of, feeling righteous indignation, okay, and try to bring a little flexibility to the table, and don't get fixated on your own perspective, because really the overarching theme of this season is how do we create a win-win rather than how do we power our own agenda through. So watch out for that on Tuesday. In the evening of Tuesday around 5 o'clock, Mercury is going to be making a sextile to Jupiter. This is a nice aspect. This is when our need to create beauty meets with the greater benefic in its own home sign or domicile of Sagittarius, and we get really optimistic about the future and about what the actions that we're taking. So this is a sextile, which is of the nature of Venus, which is beneficial. Okay, so those two planets are in a harmonious conversation. It's like Mercury has all these great ideas on how to create harmony and balance and beauty, and Jupiter's like, yeah, you can do it, and is very like encouraging and confirming and saying, I can help you with that. So there may be a part of your life ruled by the Libra area, and it's in cooperation and harmony with the Sagittarius area of your life. So check that out in your own chart. That's going to be in the evening of Tuesday. So an enthusiastic evening for setting up on Tuesday, the 24th. As we move forward into Wednesday, we're going to be experiencing our balsamic moon, and I will click that over here in a second. Just shifting my notes here. I take when I do these videos, I do about an hour and a half to 2 hours of notes for each day. It takes a while. There's a lot of investment that goes into this, but I want to make sure that I get my details correct and that I have the proper information to share with you. And every once in a while, I will misspeak, but hopefully I'm making more correct assertions than incorrect ones. And I'll do that a little bit by having some notes. So I think that if you like stuff like this and you want to create some of these things on your own, don't be afraid to have like a little, almost like a teleprompter type of thing. That can actually really help you to become more accurate. You don't have to memorize all this stuff. I know I can't possibly memorize every single detail in these videos. But here we are. So on Wednesday, let's click it over. On Wednesday, we are seeing the balsamic moon, where we have 45 degrees of distance. And you can see that the moon here is at in this particular chart, 16 degrees of Leo, and that there's 15 degrees left of Leo and 30 degrees left of Virgo, and then like just a few degrees of Libra. So as we move a little bit forward, we'll hit that 45-degree threshold, and we'll be in our balsamic moon, which is called the dark moon phase, where the moon kind of disappears. And this is where we are starting to create the seed. We're consolidating all the lessons that we learned from the previous cycle and consolidating them into some kind of legacy to be planted in the ground for the next karmic cycle to be born again. So this is about letting go of all the stuff that we accumulated in the last karmic cycle, integrating all of the lessons, and then getting ready to have a new start at that Libra new moon. So that's something we're going to start feeling on Wednesday. And we may feel a little bit of a lack of energy too. This isn't the greatest time to begin a new thing. This is the tenor of this week is more of a letting go and processing. Okay, at the beginning of very early in the day, the moon's going to be sextiling Venus. So there's a harmonious kind of ability to create a little bit of harmony very, very early in the morning there, depending on your time zone. And then the moon at 10:20 a.m. is going to be making a trine to Jupiter. And those are always fun. So you could see here the moon at 16 or 17 degrees of Leo is going to be making this applying trine to Jupiter in Sagittarius at a similar degree. And just that boost of optimism that we got in the evening on Tuesday is going to continue over into Wednesday morning. We may be seeing the fruition of the plan and feeling pretty good about it, and really being able to analyze in a way that is, incorporating those lessons into whatever we're trying to plan out for the next season, so to speak. In the afternoon, there's going to be a sextile between the moon and Mercury. So another positive fire and air combination. And as we move towards the afternoon, that's when we hit our first kind of challenge of the day, right? We've got that balsamic moon. We've got all these sextiles and trines in the morning. And then around 3:19 p.m., here we go. We've got this applying square from Venus to Saturn, Venus in Libra to Saturn in Capricorn. And that is the Venus is in the superior position, like we talked about, okay? The superior square. So we may be really required to have a compromise that we may need to make with people when we are working with Venus and Libra squaring Saturn and Capricorn. We may not be able to do it the way that we've always done it. We may not be able to just, bash our way through things, Saturnian style. Or our abilities to negotiate and create harmony may come smashing up against a wall. And we're going to have to use all of our good social niceties, manners, and, abilities to see the other perspective to get out of that conflict. Squares were said to be of the nature of Mars. So here we have, something where that's friction. There's some friction between our desires to create harmony and the necessities and the earthly necessities of the plan or the blueprint. So that can lead to a couple things. That can lead to a little bit of relationship challenges. It may be a test that we receive within our relationships. We may feel some duty or responsibility that is affecting our romantic nature. Maybe we're going out on a date, but the date doesn't turn out the way that we think. And, perhaps we are a little bit frustrated romantically. There is a need for gracefulness to achieve the plan, compromise on the blueprint, like I said. And there can be a little bit maybe of, reevaluating how we're acting within our relationships. And the other thing that's neat, a combination of Venus and Saturn, this is kind of the Marie Kondo aspect. I think Marie Kondo had a conjunction of Venus and Saturn in Libra, where Saturn was exalted and Venus was in domicile. So look at the way that she creates beauty within the ugliness and the dirtiness of like these kind of hoarding circumstances. So think about how you can bring cleanliness and beauty, which is represented by Venus, to the dirtier aspects of your life, which is represented by Saturn. Saturn represented dark, dank, dirty, cluttered kind of environments. And you may be asked to start to clean up some of the messes of your life with this aspect. So that's something to look for on Wednesday. As we move forward into Thursday, okay. The moon is going to move into Virgo. So there you see the moon has clicked over into Virgo on Thursday, and still in the balsamic phase. And while the moon is in Virgo, it gains a little bit of dignity. It has triplicity by nighttime. And it also is going to be making a nice little trine to Uranus. So instead of that square that we experienced earlier in the week with the moon in Leo, now we've got a trine between the moon and our ability to manifest, because we have a little bit more flexibility in Virgo. Virgo, of course, is the mercurial ruled sign. So Mercury is much more flexible, fast moving, less set in its ways. It's able to make the adjustments needed to bring about the new sort of systems that we need with Uranus and Taurus when we're dealing with our resources. So this is a pretty fertile combination right here. We're able to be flexible and humble. We've become humbled by the conflict that we experienced with the moon and Leo. And now we're ready to kind of like say, swallow a little bit of pride and do the necessary things that need to be done to get the job done. So that's that trine with the moon and Uranus at about 3:50 p.m. on Thursday, the 26th. And then later in the evening, we have a square happening from Mercury to Pluto. Yikes. So all the similar themes that we were talking about with Venus squaring Saturn, but with a little bit of a different flavor. When we have Mercury and Pluto contacts, we are talking about intellectual depth. We can think about with a harsher aspect like this, we may have a power struggle, a mental argument that is bringing up really deep, intense feelings. We may have a little bit of an obsessiveness in our thinking. When we combine Mercury with Pluto, Mercury is our thought processes. Pluto is our drive. It's this volcanic underworld experience, and we get obsessed with things. So our thoughts may be really intense. We may feel some morbid thinking. We may be feeling a little bit of morbidity into our thoughts, a little bit of darkness that comes along, a little bit of depression may be into the mix here. Fanaticism is not uncommon with this combination. We may experience a little bit of crude speech, right? Venus ruled Mercury wants to speak eloquently. But when we've got Pluto and Capricorn, we're adding in a dark and dirty sort of element to it. So maybe a conversation goes south. Be careful too with this combination not to use your words or your intellect to manipulate others. That can be another thing where we see with Pluto positions is we can get a real manipulative energy when we combine planets. And Mercury may try to take advantage of an intellectual situation to manipulate someone else. So that's something that we don't want to necessarily fall victim to. We don't want to butter somebody up to, talk to them with ulterior motives, so to speak, and be careful of others using their flattery to get what they want. There may be something hidden behind their motivation. So any offers that come your way, have a little healthy skepticism on the end of Thursday here, okay? As we move forward into Friday, still in that balsamic phase, okay? Getting my notes here. And we've got a number of aspects happening again on Friday. Stay up on the thing, please. There we go. Friday the 27th, Moonstone Virgo. The moon is going to be making a trine now to Saturn. Okay, we click that over. See Friday, and now the moon's making its trine at 13 degrees to Saturn. That's a positive communication between the Lady Luna and Saturn. Now, there is a little bit of a disparate type of essence essential nature between the moon and Saturn. They're sort of kind of have opposing natures. The moon associated with light, Saturn associated with darkness. So this is a time where the light and the dark are merging in a kind of positive way. So that you can think of that as the yin and the yang kind of like flowing into one another. So there's an inherent balance and harmony that's happening between the moon and Saturn on Friday. And of course, this is Venus's day, where we have Venus in really good shape in the second decan of Libra. So this may be a productive day that we're seeing on Friday. We are going to see an opposition between the moon and Neptune. So this is another echo, like this is a little ripple of that kind of mutable T-square that we were seeing over the last couple weeks, where the details were running into kind of the greater plan, and we had to kind of figure out what stayed and what goes, and we may see reverberations from that coming out, like if you throw a stone in the water and you see the ripples coming out in concentric circles, something that we may have initiated around that time may be coming back around to be dealt with in a slightly different form with this opposition. So make sure that the details of your plan are fitting into the grander picture and that you're not trying to overdo it with some kind of, illusionary thing. And it's going to be a little bit of a struggle between the practical implementation of the plan and our idealized version of it. As we move forward through the day, the moon's going to be making a square to Jupiter in the morning. So again, echoing that T-square. Okay. And then it's going to trine in the afternoon, trine Pluto, and conjoin Mars. So after we've worked through some of the flexibility that we need on Friday to make adjustments, then we're going to have a positive connection with the moon and Pluto. We may be able to wield our power a little bit more effectively with that positive earthy combination. And then the moon's going to be matching up with Mars and initiating positive action moving forward. Mars wants to take action. Mars wants to sever. Mars wants to speed things up. So we may be able to, eliminate some of the extraneous crap that is maybe holding us back from really manifesting the way that we want to on Friday. As we move forward into Saturday, that's when we get our new moon. Okay, so you can see here, now we're seeing the marriage of the moon and the sun. The king and the queen are sitting together at the table and are in union, in ecstatic union. Okay, and that new moon's going to happen at 5 degrees 20 minutes of Libra in the first decan of Libra at 2:26 p.m. on Saturday, the 28th, in the Eastern Standard Time. This is kind of a neat new moon because we're going to have all these other influences here. We've got the moon, the sun, Venus, and Mercury all in the sign of Libra, all squaring by whole sign, Saturn and Pluto, and sextiling Jupiter. So there's some positive help and assistance from Jupiter, and there's some conflict and challenges from Saturn. So this is going to be a new moon where you're going to have to balance out your optimism and your ability to create compromise and to create healthy partnerships with how it's all fitting into the plan and the limitations that you may be working within. So try not to get too frustrated with the limitations. I think that some limitations can be healthy and they help us to create form to our ideas. So this is kind of like where Saturn's providing the container and all these Libran planets, and the new moon is initiating kind of some substance, right? Some ideas. It's infusing it with life, with the air and fire combination with the sextile here to Jupiter. It's kind of igniting and animating the matter of Saturn. So that's kind of a neat thing with our new moon here. And the host Venus is also sextile Jupiter, almost exactly. This is a really nice aspect. See that? 17 degrees of Venus in Libra to 17 degrees of Jupiter in Sagittarius. Really tight sextile between those two planets. They are working together cooperatively. That's a very nice aspect that hopefully will alleviate some of the challenges of that square with Saturn and Pluto. Okay, so that's our new moon. Pay attention to what happens around the afternoon on Saturday, because that may be your signal for the work that you will need to do for the next lunar cycle. Okay, we've gotten rid of all the old stuff over the course of the week. We've prepared ourselves for this new start, and then you might really see the new impulses coming in on Saturday the 28th and the new cosmic assignment. I love that way of thinking about these new moons and the cycles. We're getting an assignment. It's not this portal where we can say, oh, you'll get to get whatever you want. I don't, that's not how it works. At least that's not how it's worked for me. And you can argue with your new age stuff that, oh, well, it's because you don't believe it. And maybe that's true. But I think that I like the way my teacher, Adam Ellenbos, describes it as it's kind of a new karmic cycle that's initiated. And if you're really realistic about your life and see how these things actually work, at every new moon, you weren't able to just do whatever the hell you wanted. Okay, sometimes you had got an assignment and you had to do some work that was challenging. So pay attention to what the universe has in store for you. Be receptive at the new moons. The moon's all about receptivity. Okay, especially at this Libra new moon, which is Venus ruled. Be receptive. Let things come to you and then respond. and then respond and say, okay, this is what my assignment is. These are the actions that are being required of me, and here are the compromises that I'm going to be making. Okay, but this may be a really great new moon for you. Maybe get a cosmic assignment associated with beauty, associated with fairness, associated with justice, associated with relationships and creating compromise and harmony within your environment. It may be the wake-up call that you need to create a little bit of balance within your own life too. Maybe you've gone a little bit off kilter, and now this is the assignment that's going to bring things back into that equilibrium. Okay, and that may not be fun at first. The myth with Libra and Librans and all these Libra placements is that they're always in equal harmony. Well, that's not always true. I have plenty of Libra Sun friends and Libra other placement friends where they get way out of whack, and then they have to bring themselves back into equilibrium. They're not always the most peaceful creatures either. They can get really pissed off, especially if they're feeling there's an injustice or an imbalance somewhere. Then they'll fight. Okay, so don't mistake your Libran friends for pushovers, all right? Because they can be as fierce of an enemy as anybody. But what they're trying to do is bring things back into harmony and back into equilibrium. So that's something we're going to be experiencing on Saturday, the 28th. On Sunday, the moon's still going to be moving through Libra, and we're going to have the perfection of a square between the moon and Saturn at about 4:08 a.m. So that may bring in more manifestations of that Libra Capricorn conflict where we're having to make compromises. A number of aspects that are going on through that day. The moon's going to sextile Jupiter. It's going to conjoin Venus. It's going to square Pluto. And then towards the end of the day, it's going to conjoin with Mercury. So it's going to, that is where we're going to see kind of all the different things starting to come into fruition, and all the different planetary actors and what roles are they going to be playing over this new cycle. This is something that I'm focusing on in my class, and as I've gone through the process of planning it, it's gone less in the direction of like a Dungeons and Dragons type of thing, which is a very complex system on its own, probably the most complex of games that you can play, and more in the direction of an astro drama, where we're playing out the roles of the planets and embodying them and trying to figure out what that planet would do in that sign, in that house, in that temple, and in communication with the other planets, which will preserve the essence of learning traditional astrology without getting us too confused with all the numbers and all of the dice rolls and things like that. We may incorporate some of that later, but the initial essence of our class is going to be, how do we interact as the planets? And that's something I want you to think about. You don't even have to take my class to think about embodying a planet and what is that planet's agenda? How is it communicating with the other planets? What place or house is it in? What topics is it trying to concretize? So like if Venus, for example, is in Libra, it is trying to, and it's in, I don't know, the 10th house. For example, if you were a Capricorn ascendant, right? You would have Libra in the 10th house. So all you Capricorn ascendants, you're trying to bring harmony and unification and attraction through your career, through your external actions out in the world, and they will concretize through very public things. So consider that there may be a public outpouring of Venusian energy, and Venus is playing out that role of harmonizing peacemaker within very externalized praxis or action out in the world. Okay. Alternatively, if you are a Cancer rising, this is going to be happening in your 4th house, right? And you may be creating harmony in your domestic sphere, in the hidden place, with your house versus with your job, with your family. And that's a great way to think about astrology. Think about that character and what's their motivation? What are they trying to achieve? And who is helping them and who is getting in the way? And if you can start thinking about astrology in that manner, you're going to have a much better understanding. And then you get to start adding in the layers, the meta layers of dignity, and like, is it exalted? Is it in its own home sign? Who's the triplicity ruler? Who's got the wind in its sails, so to speak? Who's supporting it and giving it a gust of luck? okay? And you can think of it in that way too. All right. Well, that was our astrology forecast for the week of the 23rd through the 29th. We kind of powered through that one. This is what happens when you get Libra season and your mind starts the words start to flow a little bit better, right? We can communicate with a little bit more eloquence and grace, and we trip over ourselves a little bit less. So that's what I've got for you. So my name is Spencer Michaud. Thank you all for your support. Remember to like the video and share it with your friends if you want. And we will see you on the next time. Just to look ahead real quick. Sorry, I got to give you the look ahead for the week of the 30th through the 6th. Pluto is going to be stationing direct. We're going to have Mercury moving into the sign of Scorpio. And Mars is going to be moving into its exile in Libra. So Mars is going to lose some dignity as it moves into Libra. Mercury, decent Mercury, but not at the table with its host anymore. And then we're going to see a square between Venus and Pluto. So there may be some relationship dynamics where we're have some power dynamics in relationships. So try to make the compromises early and see if you can have peaceful negotiations before things get really sticky over the next week. All right. That's what I've got, everybody. Take care and hope you have a great Libra season.